Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a moment, but I do want to give everyone a minute or so to join in case they have not yet. While we're waiting, I do want to thank everyone for joining us today. We are super excited about all of the new features in version 12. We hope that you are too and are looking forward to seeing them in action today. We do have a quite full schedule today, so if you have any questions that come up, be sure to put them in the Q&A box in your webinar controls. We have somebody that's going to be answering the questions as we go along. Hopefully they can address any questions that you have. If we do have any time at the end, we will go over a selection of the questions after the demo portion of the webinar. But as I said, we are going to be quite tight on our schedule. So please be sure to type them in as they come up in your head. This is our agenda for today. As you can see, we have a lot of items that we are going to be showing. And this is a surprise, but this is webinar 1 of 2 over version 12. We had so many topics to cover that we've decided to split that into 2 webinars. So we will be having another webinar 3 weeks from today. Go ahead and put that on your calendar. When we send out the webinar recording, we will send a link for registration for that as well. So tomorrow we'll be sending out a recording of this webinar, and that will have the registration link for the second webinar that we're going to go over version 12 features with as well. Beyond what is in the agenda for today's webinar, we also have a lot of company information enhancements, new test point fields, a lot of order system enhancements, and our upgraded advanced test point grid. So that's what's going to be covered in our IndySoft version 12 webinar part 2 in 3 weeks. Online with us, we have myself, Heather McGrath. I'm the marketing director. We also have Rhett Price, our CTO. He is going to be manning the Q&A box. So if you have any questions that come up, please enter them in the box and he will get to them as quickly as possible. We also have Mitchell Jones, our Director of Sales and Business Development. Nick Bates, many of you may know him as our trainer. He recently was promoted to account manager. We have our newest employee, Mike Lynn. He is our corporate metrologist. We're very excited to have Mike on board with us. He is an ISO 17025 specialist and has served as a technical advisor for both the ANAB and NAPT. And he was a customer of ours for many years. So he is a IndySoft power user and quite knowledgeable about the product. So we're very, very excited to have him on board with us now. And we also have Ben Sykes, our senior developer, and Chuck Summer, our junior developer and developer liaison. All right, without any further ado, we will go ahead and get started. Mitch, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start us off by showing a really exciting feature that we added in version 12. This allows you to set up multiple test point tabs within a piece of equipment or within an equipment template. So what you'll notice on screen here is I'm looking at a piece of equipment and I've got my default or my standard test points. But if you look to the right here, I've created this 3% of standard tab, which essentially just has a little bit different test point formulas applied. And then I've even got an additional tab with my ABC company specific test points. So what this feature does is it gives you the ability to, at the equipment level or at the template level, have multiple different sets of test points that you can apply. So what we've done is we've just added this new tab or this new button here where you can click this and you can add an additional tab of test points. So let's say we've got a very specific customer requirement, and we'll just call it that. And we'll just put that in as an example. And we give you the ability to clone from one of the existing tabs that you have. So let's clone from my default test points. So now I have this new test point tab here. And then perhaps maybe my formula is just a little bit different. So we'll do something like, let's just go with a bilateral formula. And let's say 0.8. And then of course we can reapply that. So now I've got a new test point tab. I essentially have 4 different test point tabs on this particular piece of equipment. Now bear in mind, you can also do this at the template level. So what happens when we have multiple tabs now is when we launch our calibration event, and let's move my tab down just a bit. So when we launch our calibration event, what's going to happen is at the beginning of the event, you're going to see this test point type pop up. And it's going to give me a pop-up window that says, well, which set of test points do I want? So let's say in this case, I just want to go with those new ones we just created, the specific customer requirement ones. There is a checkbox where you can establish this as a default, so that way the system will retain that for next cycle when we calibrate this item. I'm going to ignore that on this calibration, and let me just move this over here, and I've got my system kind of maximized here. But in the calibration event, what we're going to see now is when we get to the calibration results window, it's going to show us those specific test points for the tab that we selected. So I'm going to cancel out, okay? Now this next time what I want to do is I'm going to go to these tabs and I'm going to say that, let's say this is my ABC company. So this particular tab is what I want to make as my default. So I'm going to right click on the tab itself, and we have the ability to declare that that should be my default. Once we do that, we just flag it with that little asterisk so you know which set of test points is set up as the default. Of course, you can remove that. You can add a new tab. You can also rename, delete tabs. All that stuff is right there for you. So now that I actually have a default declared, what's going to happen is now when we launch the calibration event, the system is going to know that those are the test points to apply. So now it's giving me the specific test points that I have for that tab that we made our default. So in a practical sense, this feature right here, what it's going to help you do is reduce some of the template overhead. We've seen over the years where a lot of customers have the same instrument type, but then what they'll do is they'll have like an accredited test point template, a non-accredited test point template. Maybe they'll have, like in this example, they'll have a very specific customer who has different requirements. So they start creating templates for that customer, when really I think this is an alternative way to handle that now, because this gives you the ability to have maybe one template, but then apply the multiple different test point types that are necessary for you. So if we go and look at this at the template level, so I'm just going to open up Template Editor inside of here, and we'll just go pull up the last template that I was looking at. But when I go to my test points at the template level, the same tab options are actually going to exist. You'll see here where I can go and add a new test point tab, and then let's say that Mitchell's Rocket Company has a different set of test points or something I need to apply differently. Again, I can make that additional tab. So awesome new feature. I think it can help all customers in some capacity. It's going to really help you when you have those customer special requirements at the template level. You can start creating these now and hopefully reduce some of your template overhead. All right, if you have any questions about this or anything along the way, please utilize our question and answers box. We're going to be responding to questions as they come in, so please ask anything that may come up. Now I'm going to pass it over to Nick, and he is going to share with you our new user management system. This provides a much easier way to get new users access, especially in the read-only environment.
Thanks, Mitch. I'm going to be showing you guys our new pin code system to manage access into IndySoft. So whether you have an enterprise environment or if you guys have a Cal lab with maybe read-only users for some sort of customer portal, pin codes are going to be awesome for you guys. So as an enterprise system, you may have some managers that want to easily be able to create their own usernames for a particular profile type. Maybe you want to be able to give access to other individuals in your company in order to create users. Or from a read-only side, Maybe you guys have customers that you want to just be able to give a PIN code to and be able to create users from there. So let's go ahead and dive into this and you guys can see how it works. So we go into Options, Profile Manager, and let's just go into IndySoft. Right. Let's bring Profile Manager over. So we just right click on the user that we want to send this email to, and we say email PIN code. Right. I have a PIN code associated with IndySoft, and so I'm just going to type in an email address here. And when I fire this off, it's going to shoot an email to nick.bates@indysoft.com. There it is. So when we click on that, we have a page here that we could put your logo here, and then the PIN code is right here in the middle. So depending on what kind of information you would want to display here, if you're wanting to thank them for being a customer and give them sort of some direction here, this is fully customizable. So we take that PIN code, we go into IndySoft. Let's go ahead and get into the login screen, and we have two new icons here for you. The first one is just simply to reset the password for a username above. And then this one right here allows you to create a new user using that PIN code. So I just copied that PIN code. And then let's create a new user. Let's just call this person Jason. And we'll have it go to a different email address. All right, we say OK. And then that fired off that email. I'm just going to quickly switch to this other email address here. And there it is. It came from nick.bates@indysoft.com. Right? And then this is the temporary password without the period. So we just take that, copy it, go back into IndySoft, and now you can see I have Jason selected here. And then we just enter in that password. Hit next, and then it allows them to log in. Now notice they will be a system administrator. That's because I sent it out as a system administrator. So if you wanted to tier the access levels, you would just send the PIN code out to the desired profile type of that user, right? So now let's do another scenario where we just simply reset the password for that user. So we go in here, type Jason there, and then we say reset password for username above. When we do that, it should fire off another email, right? And so new message from myself, right? And there it is. So you have requested your password be changed, and so you just simply copy that again and paste that in there. All right. All the while not having to worry about whoever a system administrator is in IndySoft to be able to get your passwords reset or set up. All right, now I'm going to send you guys over to Mike, and he's going to cover our new statistics module.
Thanks, Nick. In version 12, we've introduced the new IndySoft statistics module to assist in the capturing and processing of laboratory analytics, things that a lab manager or supervisor would want to know, things like turnaround times, total calibration time, standards usage, etc. Now, as you can see from our example process here, we've got a receiving where the item comes in, it goes through a process of calibration and repair, and it's shipped back to the customer. Now, our KPI that we're interested in is the time differential between the receiving and the shipping. That's going to give us our total laboratory turnaround time. So to start taking advantage of the new statistics module, we have to make a few modifications to the existing events in our workflow configuration. So if you'll notice in the workflow configuration, we've added a new step 21, called statistics. This is where you define the type of data that you're going to be collecting and how it's going to be processed later. So what we want to do here is we'll create the new statistic type, and we're going to call that laboratory turnaround time. We know what the ending event is because it's on shipping, so that's where we want to put it. It's the time differential between the receive and the ship. So we're going to tell it that our starting event is the receiving. So the next two boxes here are filters that allow you to filter out anomalous data. So we say, we're saying here that if it's less than 5 minutes in a receive shipping process, we can assume that there was a mistake was made and somebody received something accidentally, for instance. Same way with our max stat time. Say if we place that at 100 days, we're assuming that anything over 100 days is some kind of anomalous data that we want to throw out for whatever reason. So we've created this new statistic. Now from this date on, this event will start collecting the data. It hasn't done anything with the previous information that you may have in your database. If you want to be able to go back in time and process that information for collection, we have a button here called Process Historical Data for All Equipment, and it will go back in time using this data, this setup here, and look at all of your receiving and shipping and start calculating the dates and updating the tables that will be required for reporting on it at a later date. If, for instance, we wanted to set up a total calibration time, we would just change to the calibration type event, and we would add a new statistic. We'll call that total cal time. And this one, we're going to use the same starting event as the calibration. So we're going to use the calibration for both the starting and the stop. And because it's a single event, this field here now is available. And you can do things like master usage, which is going to tell you over historically what your standards, your masters were used at, how many times they were used, what types of calibrations they were used on, that kind of thing. Start and stop or start and finish difference is going to be exactly what it says, the start date and time to the finish date and time of the event. You have total event time, which is just the accumulation of the event clock while the event's actually running. It may and could be different from the start finish difference based on how you're using your clocks in IndySoft. So we're going to go with total event time here. So to actually access the statistics viewer and actually make use of the data, we have a button up here on step 21 of the statistics. It's the viewer. So when you start the viewer, it brings up another window here. And we have two main filters here. This is a required filter, so we have to tell it at least what stat type that we've created are we going to want to look at. So we're going to look at the lab turnaround time. You can add additional filters here as needed. This is the data that's collected during the events for the statistics module. These are the fields within the statistics module itself. These are not required, so you can clear those out if you don't want them. Additionally, this is an extension of the equipment finder, so any of the equipment or gauge fields are available here as well. So you can filter down to specific types of equipment or other data that you might have that you're looking at that's gauge related. Again, this is not a required filter, so you can remove that if you don't want it. The options tab across the top here gives us when we're looking at it in say a bar graph mode, how many individual graph pieces do we want to have on the page at any one time. That's a personal setting, however you want to do it. You'll be able to, regardless of how many you have, you'll have a scroll bar that will allow you to go back and forth. These radio buttons here are for how do you want to view the data, whether it's in days down to the minutes up to the years, however you want to do it. Do you want some kind of sorting involved? You've got none, ascending, descending. And then the groupings is very similar to the way grouping works in a report, where you can segregate items by a hierarchy of groupings. You're allowed up to 4 individual groups. In this particular case, I've set my data to, I want to look at the branch, and through my data collection definitions, I've defined custom 1 as the parameter or discipline within the laboratory. So I'll be able to identify throughputs for individual sections within the lab, physical dimensional or RF or something like that. So once we've done our filters and got everything set the way we want, we can check our filters to see how many records we're pulling in to see if it's going to be meaningful data. In this particular case, we've got 280 records. So I can pull the records in, and that gives me a textual view of the actual data itself, broken down as we've done it in the filtering. So these are all the different types of information that was brought in and captured during the data collection. When we go to the chart, this is where we can actually see graphically how the data is stacking up. So in this case, we're looking at the branch, which was our first data level back here in our options. So we're looking at the various branches and what our average turnaround times were for each of those different locations. Now say we wanted to delve deeper into, say, the Atlanta branch and see how they're doing individually with the various parameters. So if we click on here, you can either do it here or you can select it through the drop down here. So now we're looking at the Atlanta branch broken down into the individual disciplines within the laboratory. Your laboratory may be structured such that you have different rooms or processes or whatever for the varying parameters. So this is a good way to see if you've got issues going on with different sections of the lab. For instance, we can see that hand tools is taking considerably longer than any CMM work you might have going on. So this is a very powerful tool for quickly capturing data and information about what's going on in your laboratory. If you want different types of charts, you can do that. There's various ways of laying this out. And it's a very, very powerful tool that I think laboratory managers will get a lot out of. All right, now I'm going to send it back to Mitch, and he's going to be showing you how the new IndySoft spreadsheet application works. Before I pass it over, again, I want to remind you that we'll be sending out a link to this webinar recording tomorrow. So if there's anything you want to rewatch or share with your colleagues, you will have access to that. Okay, here you go, Mitch.
Thank you, Mike. So the next feature in version 12 that we'd like to showcase is our IndySoft spreadsheet utility. What this utility is going to do is give you an alternative to using Microsoft Excel inside the IndySoft application. So we have a lot of customers and a lot of labs that use Microsoft Excel for their data sheets, and they kind of use that exclusively. What that requires is a license of IndySoft, of course, and then you still also have to maintain your license for Microsoft Excel. So what we've done is we've created the IndySoft spreadsheet utility. It's a program that allows you to open an Excel data sheet or file in an IndySoft clone. So basically the IndySoft spreadsheet tool is a clone of Microsoft Excel. So as an example, when I look at this particular piece of equipment, as opposed to using my default or standard test points, I'm using an Excel document with certificate creation. When I go to view that document, when I open this up, you're going to notice that it opens in the IndySoft spreadsheet utility as opposed to Microsoft Excel. And on this particular PC, I've set the IndySoft spreadsheet utility to be my default program for opening Excel files. But inside of here, when I look at this particular file, you'll notice it has it's a nearly identical clone of Microsoft Excel. You have the ability to put in formulas if necessary. You have all of your functions here. You've also got the ability to do statistics functions. You can insert in images if necessary. But again, it's basically a clone of Microsoft Excel that you can utilize for your data collection process. And hopefully this can help you reduce some of that Microsoft licensing that you're having to spend money on. I do want to close this and show you kind of where this gets installed and how it all works as well. So in the application, and it'll also, before I go and do that, I do want to show you if you're launching a calibration event and you're utilizing the spreadsheet utility. When I get to my calibration screen, a lot of you are familiar with this screen here, actually taking you to that Excel file. So it will embed this within the event the exact same way if you choose to use the spreadsheet utility. So I'm going to close out of that. Behind the scenes, basically when you install version 12, I've got my installation directory up right here. So when we install version 12, it's going to lay down this executable called the IndySoft spreadsheet. And again, it's just going to take you directly to that and open that Excel file with this executable. Another just example here, because I have IndySoft on this PC, I've got like a little library here of some sample Excel files, but if I open one up, it's going to open it with the IndySoft spreadsheet utility as opposed to Excel, and I'll just pull up my Fahrenheit tab, and it's just a sample certificate that I have on my PC. So basically this is a good alternative, or a potential alternative, for you to use the IndySoft client as a replacement tool over Microsoft Excel. It is a clone. You do have nearly all of the exact same functionality. There are a few limitations. The things like macros are technically not going to work, but all of the formulas that Microsoft provides you, we have those in the IndySoft spreadsheet utility. And of course, you can review our manual to see all the very specific functions that we do support. That's all published in our documentation. And that's a little bit about the IndySoft spreadsheet utility. Now I'm going to pass it over to Chuck, who's going to show you our new app for digital signatures.
So the IndySoft Signature Capture is a iOS app that's coming out to the iPhone App Store soon. It is pending approval by the iOS team, but as soon as that's done, it will be up. Essentially, what it does is it allows you to connect your iPhone using an application server to your client and upload images in the form of signatures. There's a couple places you can do this in the client. You can do it for work orders, invoices, and estimates as a document for those, and you can also add it as an event doc during an event. So to trigger the receiving side, you actually have to go to either work orders, invoice, and estimates, or an event doc, and click here to add a signature from the phone app. You'll be prompted with this dialog, and then you should do the rest on your phone. So this is kind of what the app looks like. I say kind of because the resolution makes it hard to see, but what you have is an application server, a port, a login, and a password. And once you get all your credentials passed, you can go to this screen to capture a signature. So now that the client is prompting us, we can go ahead and sign something here. For example, my beautiful handwriting, Chuck, and then hit send. The phone will tell us that it was completed, and we can see it here on my client. Since I'm in WebTier, it'll have to download to open it. So once we download this, I'll open it up to show you that it works, and then we'll test out the events as well. And if you guys have any questions, you can always drop something down in the question queue below. Here we go. Awesome. And just to show you where you would do this in the events, if you go to the event docs page, you have to be on event docs. It won't work for any of the other ones. If you go to add one, you get the same option here. One already exists, so we can remove it. And then you get the same dialog, and essentially it's the same process. So this time I'll be Charles. Send. And voila, there we go. If you guys have any questions, again, feel free to ask anything down below. We'll be happy to answer them. Thanks.
Hey guys, this is Ben. I'm going to be showing you the 12 new fields that we have in the workflow config that you can use. So these will show on the bottom here of the field settings. So they're available for layout mode and for field settings. Most of these are self-explanatory, but you've got a barometric pressure type, 6 new user-defined fields, a branch, start, date, and time, and incomplete event status. The incomplete event status we'll cover in a separate topic. So the barometric pressure and barometric pressure type, these are very much similar to the temperature and temperature type in that if the BP type is visible, then it's going to be available as an editor directly to the right of the barometric pressure. So as an example here on our miscellaneous event where I just made these visible, the barometric pressure here, when you modify that, then the type just shows in a drop down here. So that's going to give you a listing of all of your units of measure. So make sure you default or select a pressure type there from the right. So that's barometric pressure and the BP type. So these 6 user-defined fields are going to work exactly like the 4 user-defined that you've had in the past builds. So that means you could have their own labels. You can map these to current and transit locations. So as you map to different statuses, each of these statuses are going to have their own, these 6 user-defined fields can be mapped in here for current and transit labels also. You can have defaults and update equipment based on those custom fields. The branch item has a drop-down associated with that. The drop-down for branch is going to be automatically populated with any companies in your company ad edit that have the branch flag turned on. So for any item in your company ad edit list that has this branch checkbox turned on. Then finally, the start date and start time. Those are very similar to the date and time that you've always had access to, but these will be automatically stamped with the start date and time when the event's first started, and that frees you up to use the regular date and time for maybe a more specific purpose. You might want to flag the date and time when the event finishes, and then use that maybe as a statistic in the new statistics section here, the total time for the event. It's also helpful if you want to use that with one of the options here on the miscellaneous tab for update the event date upon completion. So that would automatically update this date and time with the moment when the event finishes, and then you could compare that with the start date and start time down here. So those are the new custom fields. Now I'll send it back to Chuck, and he's going to show our new print server.
Hey guys, it's me again. IndySoft Print Server will allow you to hook up your printers on a local network and assign them a specific name that you can then choose in your user location settings, even if you're not within that network. So for example, if I set up a print server in Charleston and apply all my printers to that print server, I can see them even if I'm in Atlanta using WebTier. So to kind of demonstrate that, I've set up a WebTier here. I'm in localhost, but it would work the same as if I was in a different network entirely. So on my computer, the one in the Charleston office, I can open up my print server and add printers. Now, you want to make sure that your print server is connecting to the same database that your client is. So if you go into the installation directory for Indy Print Server, which lives as a separate exe, by default it goes to C Program Files or Program Files 86. Indy Print Server, it has its own database settings. So right now mine's pointing at the IndySoft database, which is the same as my client here running on WebTier. Once it's all set up and installed, you can then start adding printers. So it lives in the system tray, and you saw me do earlier, you can right click and go to print server settings. And from here, you can add printers. So let's say we want to set up My Brother printer. We can name this Sticker Printer. Okay. And then it adds in your server name, which I already set as Chuck's Office, and then the printer name after that. Now in IndySoft, you can then see these from user location settings. We'll have to do a quick reload for them to come up. Printer 1, Chuck's Office Sticker Printer. There we go. So if we save and close that, that will now be the printer that any sticker printer goes to. So if I have printer 1 set to print my stickers, it'll now go to Chuck's Office even if I'm from Atlanta. So for a more useful scenario, let's add a real printer and go ahead and print a cert. So then we'll name this the Big Printer. I am the expert at naming things. Get another reload. Change printer 1 to the Big Printer. Save and close. And now let's go ahead and run an event. So we have a new gauge here, and we want a nice and easy calibration. Okay. And now Cert 87 is being created, and it will be added to the print queue here. So now it is printing, and I guess you'll have to take my word for it, but the printer in the other room right now is printing my cert. Thanks guys. Now I'm going to hand it back to Ben, and he's going to tell you about the charge template system.
Another handy new feature we have in version 12 is our charge templates functionality. So this is going to be available both from the equipment view and the templates view. So let me give you an illustration of this. Like on this asset here, it's linked back to this particular template. So let's just pull that one up. So you're going to see this interface anywhere that you would associate charges, equipment level or template level. So you can see in this example, we're linked back to one of these charge templates. But if I unlink that here, then you can see it goes back to its normal interface where you would be entering these charges. So the charge template system is just an extra layer above, allowing you to abstract your charges so that you could apply the same slate of charges to multiple templates at once, and then or to multiple assets, or to multiple templates and all the assets to which those templates are related. So it's all meant to be just a time saver when you're entering charges. So as an example here, say we've got just a calibration charge that's set up on this particular template. So instead of this, we could associate back to a charge template, and that charge template has its own listing of charges, and that would quickly populate onto the template level and affect the related assets. So then if you wanted to modify the charge template, you just press this button to the left, and that shows you the new charge template system. So each charge template is just given a generic name. You've got a creation date, the last person that modified it, last modified date, an optional description, and then it's just a grid listing your charge, your various charges that should be associated with this charge template name. So here we've just got a $105 calibration and a travel charge. So if that's the same price structure that you have across multiple templates, then now you can put this in one place in the database and quickly make changes that affect all related templates and assets. So from this charge template screen, you can quickly add new items here. You can search on your charge templates. You can clone from other items, modify names, refresh or delete these. Each time you've pulled up a charge template, you can see a quick review of all the related templates and then the related equipment. So you can see in this illustration there's 2 templates that are linked back to this charge template, and among those 2 templates, those map back to 5 related assets, and there are currently 0 assets that are directly linked back to this charge template. So you can either link assets through the template to the charge template or link the assets directly to the charge template. So you can see in this case we're linked back to both of these assets, linked back to this thermometer glass here. So that's why we have this $105 and $20 charge. But if we modified those on the level of the charge template, then that would automatically affect all the related templates and assets. So if we refresh this, now we're at 110 on all the related assets. So that is our new charge template system. Next is one of the biggest new features in version 12, the config changes and locks utility. So this enables us to make a snapshot of every change in the system. So anytime someone will modify event configuration, modify a report or a layout, anything like that, not only will we have a log of who made the change, but we can also take a snapshot of that particular configuration item at each point. So we can know who might have broken something and then quickly revert back to the state of that report or layout or event before that change was made. And then the second thing that we can accomplish with this utility is to maintain locks on these objects. So that prevents 2 or more people trying to modify the same object at the same time, like the same report or the same event. Solves the too many cooks in the kitchen type thing. So this utility, or the data that is assembled here, can be viewed from this config changes, and that's a hyperlink that you could add in to the home view. So it just gives you a viewing of changes and locks, and then there's a third tab here for settings. If you're a system admin, you could set this up. So any of this functionality you're about to see, if it's not helpful or not useful, you can always turn that off from one of these settings. So it's just going to save all the changes and then the various locks. So let's demonstrate here in the print builder. So let's pull up just our standard certificate here. So you'll notice just as soon as we pull it up, if we go back to the configs and locks here and refresh, then you can see a lock has been set up for this certificate. So now if a different user tried to modify this while we have this screen currently pulled up, they would be blocked from editing. And it would say, this is the user currently editing this. You could send them a quick email and help them with that process. But this lock's not going to be removed until we close out of this form. And now the lock is gone. So then if we pull up this and actually make a change, let's move this down to 10-point font. Then when we save this, then now we're going to be forced to describe the change that we made. So this is going to be added into the archive. So we could say, lowered the fonts on title. This is a massive change. So there's a setting behind the scenes whether you want to force a comment to have to be input each time. That might be overkill, but a lot of times it's really good to make people justify exactly what they're doing. So now, behind the scenes, if we go back to the Changes tab here, you can see we have a snapshot of the change that was made, and this is the description here. So behind the scenes, we've also saved this, so if we can revert to that later on. So now let's go out of this, and let's say a second person comes up and they just delete this entirely because they're not paying attention, and now we have no title. So now back in the config system, if I refresh, now there's a couple revisions here. There's no title and then the earlier one. So then someone else notices this and says, this report doesn't have a title anymore and this is awful. So then they can go back in to the revision control system and revert back to that particular moment. So revert to selected change archive. So this operation will revert to the one that's selected. The updated configuration will then be backed up as a new archive. So there you go. So now if we go back in, now we've restored it back to its prior state, and we've got a full audit log of the entire system there. So on the left, you can see the different types of information that we can automatically track here. Any changes to the alarm system, custom rules that are not related to the event system, data sync scripts and sync maps, any event configuration, IndySoft searches, print builder templates, screen layouts or flowcharts, script projects, and standard reports. So that covers just about everything. So you can filter those by different date ranges or a particular user or across all users. So the different options you have here, just refresh, automatically refresh every minute, delete an archive, and there's security settings related to all these. Export the selected change. You could select that or export that off to a file, and that is another helpful way of taking a particular change and maybe sending it to another test system that you have that's available in a separate database. And then you can revert the change there. So then from the locking system, these locks only appear while something is being edited, like we saw there on the certificates. They appear while the lock is there. So when you close, you could also have an option to retain the lock. So one of these settings that you have here, prompt to retain lock here, this prompt to retain lock setting. So let me back out of this and demonstrate in Print Builder. So if we turn on in Print Builder templates this option to prompt to retain lock, then you might prefer to not necessarily get all of your work done in one session, but still retain the lock on a particular item. So that means if I'm in here and I've made a few changes and I've even saved my work, but I want to keep that, then that prompt's going to look like this. I just refreshed my security there behind the scenes. So now when we exit, since I have that option turned on, then it's going to prompt me to retain the lock. So keep the lock for later editing or remove the lock to allow other people to edit. So if I keep that, and then back in my config changes, then now this lock is going to be retained. So if someone else tried to log in that was different than this John Doe user, then they would not be able to do that. So if I logged in as Ben instead of John, and then went back to Print Builder and tried to edit this, then it'll say this item's been locked, and would you like to send John an email? It's the best you can do. Now if you're an admin, you can go into the config changes utility and you could manually remove that lock or inactivate that, but you have to have the appropriate security over here in order to do that. So that's the new config changes and locks utility. Now I'm going to pass it back over to Nick, who's going to show you our new data rollback feature.
All right, this is our data rollback feature with document sign-offs. So we've added on to our document sign-off feature, and we've added in a way to revert the changes back to what the asset was at the end of the calibration event. So currently our calibration tracking status, or our tracking status is out for cal. What we're going to do is calibrate this asset. And test-1, and we're just going to go through it, not worried about the specifics of our event. And then it generates the cert. So now let's say, all right, it's checked in. We can run this event through some other statuses. Okay, so its tracking status is checked in. test 1, let's check it out. Push it over into checked out. Now, if we go into the equipment view, take a look at this calibration event, it's requiring a document sign-off. So we go into pending work to document sign-offs and sign it off. When we do that and take a look at the document and realize it's no good, we can go ahead and fail it, hit OK. And what this is going to do is it's going to fail the evaluation and mark it as incomplete, and then it's going to take the asset and restore it from the archive created at the time of the event completion. This restores the tracking status and all related equipment details back to its previous state. So by doing that, if we go back to this test 1, right, it has taken it out of checked out and moved it in to checked in. All right. And so now the technician would have to redo the calibration in order to move forward with the asset. All right, now I'm handing this back to Mike, and he's going to show you guys our new cert revision support, which will help you guys when it comes to your 17025 accreditation.
Thanks, Nick. New for version 12 is the capability to have certificate revisions. In older versions, anytime that you incompleted a calibration and recompleted it for whatever reason, it would create a new certificate using a completely new certificate number. Well, starting with version 12, you can have revisions to your certificates where it uses the same number with a revision number attached to it. So the way you start that is with your profile manager under management, numbering and certificate settings. If you'll notice, there's a new box down here, new checkbox called certificate rev control. So click that and we reload all the settings, and you'll notice what it does. It goes through and it finds them all and creates a rev 1 for that certificate. So now let's say, for instance, we've had to go in and incomplete this event and mark it to fix the temperature issue here. So now we're going to go ahead and complete the event as normal. And you'll notice it's created the new certificate rev 2 using the same previous number. Well, to take full advantage of that, what you're going to want to do is then go into your certificate template editor, and you'll notice here I've got the certificate number, which is our normal pipeline certificate number field, and we've added the rev level field to that pipeline. So by updating your template with this new field, you'll be able to have the revision print out on your certificate. So now you've kept the same main number and you're just changing revisions as needed, and IndySoft will keep track of it as time goes on. Hopefully this will be a benefit to labs out there. To close this out, I'm going to send it back to Ben, and he's going to show you the new option of having an incomplete event status.
Thanks, Mike. We have a new field available in the workflow configuration that allows you to specify a status for why the event is currently incomplete. So let me show you how this can be turned on for display. So let's use this miscellaneous event as an example. So you'll see it down here. At the very bottom, it's labeled incomplete event status. So we have it turned on, visible currently, and it's made to be visible here. We're in layout mode. So if you just turn this field on, then let me show you the default functionality on that. So what we're trying to accomplish here is give you a place to explain why the particular event is incomplete. So say if we ran this miscellaneous event, then when it first appears, by default, this incomplete event status is going to be in process. So if you just perform the event normally and then finish the event, and then reviewed it as complete, then that particular event, that field is going to be cleared out because the event is no longer incomplete. So the purposes of this, frequently users will have this completed field that we've had in the database for years that will be pre-populated with the word complete to maybe save some time in data entry. And then maybe they'll have to go back into the event and actually add some stuff in later. And for different reasons, maybe when you're looking at this this event in the event finder or other event-based searching, then it'll be mixed in with other events that actually are in a different status. So it's just nice to be able to report on this. Like say if we went into event finder and we were returning items in this. So now we've got this new field that we can use, this incomplete event status. Let's make it a little bit more visible here. So now if that field were visible in certain events, then that would be something that we could search on. So let me give you an illustration of that. So let's start one of these events and leave it incomplete, this miscellaneous event. So it starts in process, but let's leave it like that. And now when we search on that in Event Finder, I should have saved my grid setting. Then now you can see we've got one event that gives us a little bit more details on that in process. So that's the default functionality. So there's only one other status that will work just out of the box along with in process. The other one would be if your event happens to have a sign-off and different sign-off rules added in there. So let's add a sign-off for the user that's currently logged in. Then that might be another moment to automatically flag why that event is currently in queue. So let's add in a new event here. So notice the default status on this miscellaneous event, now that there's a sign-off step, is awaiting sign-off. So if we get to the end here and we don't sign off and complete the event, then now if we happen to look at that in various searches, then it'll be a little more clear why that event is still in process. So we've got one that's in process, another one that more specifically is awaiting sign-off. So finally, the other option that you could do with this particular field, and by the way, this would work if you're in regular field mode or in layout mode. But if you want to further customize that list, so you can use something besides awaiting sign-off or the initial status there, is you could go to your event lists. And if you'll notice, this 0 list here on the very bottom is now labeled incomplete event statuses. So you could add your own text here, like I've added manager alert, technical review, whatever terminology you've got for why an event might be stuck before it gets complete, feel free to add that in. And if you've done that, then when that event is run, now you have the ability to choose those custom items. So now you could say it's in a technical review. See, even if it stays incomplete, now you've got more details on that state. And with that, that is the last thing we have to show you today. I'm going to pass it back to Heather to finish the webinar off.
Thank you, Ben, and the rest of the IndySoft team. There was a lot to digest there, and I hope you guys are all excited about implementing these new features that we have available in version 12. As I stated at the beginning of the webinar, we are going to have a version 12 part 2 webinar 3 weeks from today. The times will be the same. Here is the link, but we are also going to send that out in the email that has the link to the recording of this webinar, so don't worry about writing that down. It does appear like we've ran out of time for Q&A, so hopefully you did get your questions submitted into the Q&A box and Rhett was able to answer them for you. I did see quite a few questions coming in and answers going out, so if we did not get to your question, we will respond to you individually. If you come up with any questions later in the day or after you rewatch this webinar, please feel free to email us at either sales@IndySoft.com or support@IndySoft.com, and we will be glad to answer that for you. Before we conclude, I do want to get in one more plug. We are offering a web training for version 12. It's a 5-hour package for $750. So if you would like to get into some grittier detail of these features and how would be the best way to implement them into your system, we are offering that. Again, if you are interested, please contact sales@IndySoft.com. We're so glad that you took the time to spend with us today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Take care, everyone.